Hi, welcome to God Stories today. My name's Chris Thompson. You guys coming? Hello and welcome to God Stories today. I'm in Amersham today, about to enjoy an interview with a gentleman who is probably the busiest person I've probably ever met. So I feel really, really privileged to have his time this morning. And we've already talked quite a lot. The cameras have been rolling, which is great. So I might be able to sort of edit in what he's already been saying. But it's Gary Grant.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, the owner of the Entertainer toy stores. So if you've ever seen those on the high street, this is the gentleman who owns those stores. And there's quite a story behind the stores and behind Gary Grant's life. Before we get into that though, as I always say, please do subscribe to the channel. The more subscribers we have, the more, if you like, gravitas in the viral world, the virtual world that we have, and the more evangelistic things we can do resultantly. Check us out on social media, on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Just look for God Stories Today and tell everyone about it as well. And do pray, because there's an awful lot of events, annual conference about to be started that we're formulating as I do this interview now. So there's lots and lots of things to get on with and to be prayed about. Gary, welcome to God Stories Today. Well, it's actually your context. We're in a wonderful place this morning called Restored Hope, which you're going to hear about more in a moment, but it's an absolutely beautiful context we're in right now. So welcome. It's really, really great to have you here. It really is. We normally start off with a snapshot of where the person is right now. So like who you are, what you do, that sort of thing.
Well, I'm married. I've been married for 41 years this year.
Congratulations.
I was married just before I was 21. I've 4 children and 7 grandchildren. So all the children are married. 2 of my 3 boys work in our family business. My daughter helps run our foundation. And my youngest son and his wife are currently in Bethel, in Reading, in the USA, doing a course at Bethel Church. So they're due back in June, and we're excited to hear all the things that they've been involved in.
I'm quite jealous. I'd love to be there. Always wanted to go to Bethel.
We've been. We were there. We went to a conference 2 weeks after they arrived just to make sure they were settled, and spent some time going around buying a few bits of furniture and things, because they ended up with an empty place, and we just left them, as parents do, trying to fill up the cupboard with a few things to eat and drink. Barbecue and all that sort of stuff, and they've created a really lovely community there. But 1,000 young people every year are the first yearers going through Bethel.
Wow.
And having really quite a concentrated course, and it's been good for them. It's really challenged them. And then business-wise, we've been in business for just under 40 years. I started in business in 1981. We bought one Ailing toy shop in Amersham. This is where we started. And today we have 170 odd shops in the UK. We have about 30 international franchise stores. That's stores we don't own, but they use the Entertainer name. We purchased the Early Learning Centre brand from Mothercare a year ago, and was just working through how that's going to be at the moment, and bit of a setback as Mothercare have finally closed in the UK, so that access to market has been closed. But there are roughly 400 ways of buying ELC toys around the world, from standalone toy shops in the Middle East to toy departments inside international Mothercare stores through franchise partners. So we move quite a lot of toys every year.
Actually, before this interview, where was I? I was down in Torquay.
Torquay, yeah.
And there's an Entertainer store there. And I was walking past it, and I obviously knew I was going to interview, and I went in there and I thought, wow, this is it. This is amazing. I was walking around, and it's a fabulous, fabulous experience. It really is. So congratulations.
Thank you.
This is your God story. So we start at the very beginning. Where were you born?
So I was born in Wembley in 1958, so I'm 61. 62 this year, turned the year. When I was 3, my parents were divorced, so we moved to a place called Untitled Chapter. That's actually where we are today.
Right.
So the grounds of Restore Hope Latimer, the charity that we founded 18 years ago, are the fields and the woods and the lake that I, as a child, played in, built fires in, played in and around the area, poached fish out of the lake as a kid. So this is like home, really.
So it's a twofold question here. I want to say, what were you like as a child? And bless you, if you don't mind me asking, because GST is a safe place, so if you don't want to talk about it, no problem. But you mentioned your parents' divorce. And I know what that's like. And it plays a significant role in anyone's life. And it was interesting how you mentioned that this used to be the place at that time in your life when your parents had just been divorced and you found yourself here resultantly that you played in. But now here you have Restored Hope, the charity. So there's obviously a powerful thing there in terms of forming you, in terms of what's happened to your heart, and perhaps your receptivity to God as well, resultantly. I think, so there's a lot in there. I mean, I could just say, would you like to talk about that? But I think I'm sort of asking something along the lines of, are you willing to talk about how you felt when the divorce happened, how you felt playing here, and what it feels like now to have this amazing institution here called Restored Hope?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah.
That's longer than the interview, but I guess when you're 3, you're just going through something that is just another day. I'm not sure at the time you quite understand what's actually gone on. And I might have asked questions to where was Dad in all of this, and I don't know whether I had a response, whether I asked that question. But certainly growing up, as many children do, in a reformed family, so a new stepfather's on the scene, and life is different. And some of those relationships might be amazing. I actually found that relationship quite difficult. And in a way, it's a bit like being the baggage from a previous relationship that gets dragged into a new relationship. So a child from a past relationship, mum's got a new partner. And back in the very early 60s, in a local village like Little Chalfont, my freedom was actually outside the family. So I had a little scooter and I was just off and about. No way I'd let my children of 6 or grandchildren of 6 have that freedom going around today. Society's changed and moved on so much. And therefore I was just out and about and I remember I must have been, I was probably 8 when I saw a box of biscuits or chocolates in the bread shop that I bought the family bread on a Saturday. My job was to go to the bread shop and get the bread on a Saturday. I saw this box of chocolates that I thought I'd buy for my mum for Christmas. And I've told this story many times, and it's but it's still I think there are building blocks, there are stepping stones that you can remember certain things in your life that I guess set you on a journey. So as an 8-year-old and 10 and 6, and for those that don't know what 10 and 6 is, it'd be 52.5p today, just over £0.50. Back in 1970, 1966, 1967, that would have been a fairly substantial amount of money. So as a child with basically no money, our family had no money, if I was going to buy this box of chocolates, I guess I could either steal the box of chocolates or steal the money or earn the money. There were just a few options. So I remember knocking on a door of a really large house 50 metres from this bread shop, baker's, and saying, have you got any jobs I can do? And this lady, I don't know what she saw standing on her doorstep. She said, I've got some jobs you can do. So I remember I used to go there every Saturday and I used to collect the eggs from her chickens, and I used to sweep up the leaves that she probably threw on the path an hour before I arrived. And I did a bit of hoover. It was, honestly, I think she just found things for me to do. But at the end of the Saturday morning, there was a cake on a plate, a glass of orange, and half a crown. You don't know what half a crown is, do you?
No.
No, 12.5p.
Okay.
So basically 4 Saturdays was nearly my box of chocolates. And I remember when I had 10 bob, 50p, I walked in this Saturday morning to this baker's, Darville's the bakers, in fact, another generation on, they're still locally in Chesham. And I said to them, I want to buy that box of biscuits, chocolates for my mum for Christmas, but I've only got 10 bob. And it was 10 and 6, so I was short. And they did me a deal. So there I did, I walked out this shop, and that's when I realised that nearly everything is for negotiation. So that was my first encounter of earning money and being able to buy something I wanted. So from that early stage, I just started doing jobs.
Did you have a sense of fending for yourself and needing?
Absolutely. It was a case of, if you wanted it, you had to go out and get it. It was never going to be given to you.
So this is where your entrepreneurial spark was born?
Could have been. Yeah, are you born with it?
No,
does it nurture? Can you acquire it? Can you learn it? I don't know the answer to any of those things. But out of a sense of survival, I guess, I started doing all sorts of different things, whether it be washing cars or penny for the guy in those days outside the station with the wheelbarrow and the stuffed guy. It's called begging, but different name. But always round, I earned money for sweets or earned money for holidays, whatever it happened to be. And then we moved from Little Chalfont, where we are now, to Amersham, which is 2 miles away. Moved to a bigger house, went to a junior school in Amersham, failed my 11 plus. So we're a county of grammar schools, still are today. And it's a huge pressure on youngsters growing up when parents have got aspirations as to where their children what they should achieve and where they should go to school. And then children fail their parents' expectation. So I failed my 11 plus and went to the school for failures. In fact, Mark Mellowish, a fantastic vicar from Ealing, done brilliantly well within Christian circles, involved with New Wine, all sorts of things. He was in my class at school. So 2 failures have done pretty well.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark. So when I moved to Amersham, as I was getting older, I had a morning paper round, I had an evening paper round. I got to know the community because of all the stuff out there. I worked on a milk round when people predominantly had their milk delivered to their doorsteps in those days. I worked in a bike shop. Scouts saved me from saved me from lots, really. It gave me a purpose. So when I wasn't at home, I immersed myself in Cubs and then Scouts, and they gave me the freedom. We went camping, all the other things that Scouts do in nurturing youngsters, team building, friendships, all those sorts of things. It kept me out of trouble. But my Arcala from the Cubs had a sweet shop in Amersham, so I worked in her sweet shop. So all those jobs added up to me just really totally focused on earning money. And I guess in my peer group, I probably had more money, even though it wasn't family money. I had to go out and earn it and graft it. And I think that gave me at an early age, that experience, which youngsters today, we can't employ youngsters under 16. They can do a bit of work experience. But at 16, I knew how to buy and sell. I'd worked out my own understanding of the economy. And that's how life was. So then I went to my school, my senior school. Really didn't like school. I'm dyslexic. The whole thing was a bit of a blur. But numbers, I'm not dyslexic with numbers. I can work them out in my head. So I did really well with my maths. English, languages were a complete washout. Sports I didn't really like. Working was was what I enjoyed most. I left school with an O-level in maths and spent a fair amount of time standing outside classrooms, which was shameful in a way, but dyslexia was not really understood in the late 60s and early 70s. So you become labelled. You're a disruptive child, you're a naughty child, you're all those things. And I think those are the labels that, you'd almost hear people talking about you being... And I just think that... I think there's the truth, and there's the truth and what you can do in the power of encouraging words. So you can say to a child that they are naughty. A child per se is not naughty, they might do naughty things, but that is not a word of encouragement. You can in your own mind, you can put into an order of importance. And you could say that being an accountant, a solicitor, those are very worthy professions. And you could say, I'm not saying people do, but you could say a musician, an artist, a sportsman, that's completely different. So in our minds, we can order things, but for that individual person, their nugget of gold is what they're capable of doing. And therefore, we should have the same respect for every child in watering and nurturing their nugget of gold, not trying to pigeonhole where in society the importance is. So the school of failures that I went to was exactly the right school for me.
All right.
I would have completely sunk in the grammar school. I wasn't that academic. I'm not stupid, but on the other hand, writing essays and all that sort of stuff, that's not me. So being dyslexic, writing and word spelling is an utter nightmare to me. So writing a letter might haunt me for 3 days before I get around to doing it, and then not be great. And yet my wife can spend 15 minutes and something like that. That is amazing. You've just written the script for the very best letter. And that's just the way it is. We're all different, but we need to value our differences, not diss our differences.
Thank you for that. I want to take you back though, just one question before we move on from this season of your life. In my mind, I'm imagining you as that young man learning how to buy and sell in the way that you were. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine life felt to a certain degree quite vulnerable because your family life was as your family life was. And then here you are, you discover that actually if you work hard, there's a reward. And equally, you found almost automatically a way of working hard that worked for you. And then life, I suspect, felt like there was a way in which it could be less vulnerable. You work hard, it's less vulnerable. You work hard, you're rewarded in that, and you're able to, if you like, populate your life with things that make life less vulnerable, as it were. Did you sense that at the time? Would you say that's accurate? So I'm just trying to get into your soul.
I think I'm not sure you sit down and you plan it like that. I'm not sure you...
But in retrospect?
Well, in retrospect, I think if I look back, life could have gone off in so many different ways.
Right.
And when I left home at 17 and went to live in digs, it was just like the moving on. In the same way today, children think that they progress through school, and many think they've just gone to university. But university, when I left school, was like what other people do. It wasn't like what I do, or I could do. So I left school. I went to work in Amersham in a bicycle shop. It was a shop that I worked in part-time when I was at school on Saturdays and school holidays. It was a very small team. I ended up managing the shop, but I knew the bike trade inside out. I learned really well practically, not by reading. So you can give me a set of instructions and I'll be completely confused by the whole damn thing, but I'll be wanting to diss those and just use my skills and put it together, and then you end up with a bit left over. So just sitting down with my grandson and going through the instructions in Lego has been quite amazing because there's no words. So Lego is one of those things that it's like an equalizer. You don't have to be intelligent to make Lego, just need to be able to follow the instructions. But if you want to start from page 7, you're probably going to get it wrong. You'll start from page 1 and work through. And we've had good fun making Lego, just literally pictorially, just going through how you end up putting things together. Because so we learn differently. So it was a case in those early years of survival. Then it was a case of wanting to, I guess, to thrive. I could see opportunities. And also I think in each one of us, our ability to take risks determines how we perceive things. So there are very cautious people and there are outrageously large risk takers. Now, risk taking for me is calculated risk taking.
Okay.
So betting is that's not risk taking. That's outrageously risk taking. So I have the ability of seeing something, because I've struggled to see why other people can't see what I see and do things that I can do, thinking, why aren't we all? But we're all different, And therefore I can look at a situation, particularly in business, and think, well, I could do this and this and this. And I guess I'm scheming. That's a strange word and it could be used wrong, but I'm weighing my upside, I'm weighing my downside, and I sort of know how to pitch things. And not everything we buy we get right, but we get more right than we get wrong. And that's the important thing about life, is weighing it all up, establishing what your risk appetite is, and then going for it.
I want to ask, you've touched on a subject that I was going to ask you. It came to mind as I was driving to see you this morning and I was praying, and it's something on the lines, I've wrote it down. What has taking risks and making investments in your professional life taught you about taking risks and making investments in relation to God?
That's a really good question. Well, a lot of it comes down to our character. From a God perspective, I think that I wasn't a Christian. I wasn't brought up in a Christian home. And then God gate crashed my life one weekend. I didn't need him or want him. I was doing okay, thank you. I was making money. I'd moved to a bigger house in Amersham, and I couldn't see the relevance of it. It's just an old-fashioned story. But then as time went on, you start to take little risks with God, and you see it works. And then you take another risk with God, and you see it works. And then you read, I think it's 1 Samuel 30, and it says, I paraphrase, "Those that honour me, I will honour." And you look back and think, it works. It works. But the thing is, it's about our heart and it's about our motive. Because God isn't a slot machine, he's not an ATM. You just don't put the right in to get more out. That's not the way God works. God wants to know, I think, our heart. And are we doing what we're doing because we know it's the right thing to do? Or are we doing it because we think God will give us more back? Because that's prosperity gospel, and I'm not really signing up for that. And I think as you trust God more and as God trusts you more, I think the journey that we're on, and it is definitely a journey, you don't get God all in one go, you get a chunk of it, it becomes exciting, you go on a journey, and actually over time the whole thing builds, and it becomes from what I was taught at school, God and me, and a big void between, to actually Jesus and me walking in a partnership. And when I first heard about Jesus at a men's breakfast that I was invited to when I was 33, I sat there in disbelief that this guy was standing up and talking about a relationship, and I did RE at school.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, hold on, but they're two completely different things. Nobody told me about relationship. It was about a theory, and now about something personal. And that's when the penny dropped. So I left that men's breakfast on the 4th of May 1991, ended up on a Saturday morning, ended up taking myself to church on the Sunday evening of the 5th of May 1981, and God just got me. And then I had to work out now what I was compared with who I was there prior to that, how I was running my business. I've been in business for 10 years on an anything goes, make money only basis. No guidelines as to how you make money, just make it. To start saying, well, hold on a minute, but how are we running our business? How does this fit? And I was convinced after 6 weeks that the future looked like me giving up being in business and being a missionary.
Oh, right.
You know, because I just couldn't see the two were compatible.
Right.
And it was a local Christian accountant I had lunch with about 6 weeks in, so it might have been June, July 1991. He said, Gary, maybe the way you're running your business, being a Christian, aren't compatible. You've got to smarten up your act. And that really was the beginning of a journey of saying, well, you know, how do I weave what is predominantly a Sunday thing into a way of life? How do I take Jesus from Sunday and make it Jesus for all 7 days of the week through my other 6 working days? How do I, as a Christian, measure up to how God wants me to live and run this business? Because I'm in a unique position being the owner with my family. So all my 4 children are part owners, and with as a family owning this business, how are we how are we representing Jesus in the marketplace in the way that we do what we do? That's with our customers, it's with the products that we sell, it's with our staff. And then people say, oh, well, I saw you didn't do this and I saw you didn't do that. Now it all starts to make sense because we need to walk the talk. You can't say one thing yet do something else. This faith has to be weaved through all that we do in a way that's compatible with what we're saying we do and who we are.
And what have you seen God do with that?
Well, it's been really exciting and really rewarding because swimming against the tide, which you wouldn't choose to do because you do get your head shot off sometimes, has worked for us. It's been, the year that we decided we weren't going to stock Harry Potter, I swam against the tide because it was Toy of the Year that year. Mm-hmm. And God has a sense of humour. I'll give you one quick, you're going to have to edit this out because there's so much. But that year I was chairman of the Toy Retailers Association, and we have a big dinner in London where all the best selling toys for the year are announced and given certificates. And the Toy of the Year that year was Harry Potter, and therefore I was given the certificates out. And the industry knows that I didn't stock Harry Potter, and they know that I'm a Christian. Grace doesn't get said out most dinners, but when it was said, all the dinners back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, I was the one who got wheeled out to say the grace, which was fine. I was happy about that. And Lego made a life-sized Harry. Oh. So there's Harry and Gary giving out all the certificates. Every photograph that year of certificates being given out for the toys of that year, which Harry Potter was the toy. Harry and Gary are in it. And that's God just having a little bit of a giggle with me because, everyone knew that I didn't stock Harry Potter. But my mission in life is not to instruct. I am telling you my story. I am not telling you that you shouldn't buy Harry Potter, read Harry Potter. God didn't say that I should campaign against Harry Potter. Mm-hmm. God just challenged me, I believe, to say, Gary, how's this relationship working? Mm-hmm. You looked at the products when they were put on your desk and you felt uncomfortable in the way that you perceived those products on your desk. Something inside you challenged you, and that is the way that God has, the Holy Spirit, which was a whole new concept to me, that God can actually make me feel something, make me be concerned about today, about me right now. So there's the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, the Trinity, which I learned at school, which in those days was the Holy Ghost, which again didn't make any sense to me then. But this Holy Spirit is God's way of it's His email to me in a way. It's the way that He can make me feel or highlight something to me. When those products were on my desk, something inside me made me feel uncomfortable.
Right.
And therefore I made that decision we weren't going to stock it. Now, if you could write down, from a biblical perspective, write down exactly why you're not stocking Harry Potter, I can't. I can just tell you, this is what I felt God was saying to me. But then did He say, get a soapbox, go and stand in the public square and campaign against Harry Potter? He didn't say that to me. That isn't the role that God's given me. There are theologians and other people that are far more educated than me that can make a judgment about whether things are right or wrong, whether they're biblical or not biblical. God was just saying, this is the journey that we're on, Gary. I want to see whether you're faithful in this journey. And there's been other products that we haven't stocked. There's been other things in life where we've chosen not to do one thing. We've chosen to go in a different direction. And I might have got it wrong. God may not have said that to me whatsoever. But it was my understanding of that situation. And therefore, I think as Christians, we need to support other people in what they believe God has said to them, even though we look at it and think, well, that was bizarre. Why did you do that? Because many Christians have said, I don't agree with your stance on Harry Potter. Right. Well, I haven't really made a stance for them. I've made a stance for me. And
with that rationale then, on the whole, from the interviews that I've seen, especially the one done by the master evangelist, J. John, on the whole, God has blessed you when you stood up against the tide and you followed this internal thing.
Yeah.
I like what you said about taking risks and making investments done based in relationship.
Yeah.
And it's about motivation as opposed to God being some sort of like slot machine. You put money in, you get money out. I you might not have been asked this sort of question before, so forgive me if it feels a little bit alien to you, but I look after, within the Church of England, pioneer ministers. I coach ministers on the ground as well, and I'm a church planting coach also. What you have as a gift to get things off the ground, and to do so in the way that you just described, in terms of making calculated risk based on relationship and motivation and other such things. What would you say to pioneer ministers in the Church of England right now, and church planters in the Church of England now, in terms of process and how to hold themselves in what they feel is a God-given calling to do whatever initiative or event or church plant that they're being called to do? What advice would you give them?
Believe in yourself. And the reason I say that is because if you ask 3 people the same question, you're likely to get 3 answers.
Right.
And therefore, I think you can be thrown off course by people's points of view. Now, I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm talking about, if you really believe that's the right thing to do, then do it. And if you look at people that have gone on to be amazing entrepreneurs and pioneers and game changers, James Dyson, a hand dryer, well, he had to believe in himself, because it was completely different. And then probably the most famous entrepreneur, UK British entrepreneur, is Richard Branson. Dyslexic, but went on to do. But you have to have belief in yourself. So with that ability to weigh up risk, see an opportunity, weigh up risk, of course seek counsel, but in the end not be thrown off course. Because if you speak to a less risk, a person who's less of a risk taker than you, they're going to pull you down. And okay, some things we've done wrong. They just haven't worked. But on the other hand, if you're not in the game, you can't win. You've got to have a go. So I often say to young people in particular, I say to them, dream big dreams. If you don't aim high, you won't hit high.
Amen.
So if you aim low, you'll hit low because you're only aiming low. So believe in yourself, aim high, dream big dreams, put people around you that, that you can seek advice from. But in the end, when you've had the advice, you have to weigh up whether you go for it, whether you don't, because we're all different. And if you've got something you believe is a runner, then believe in yourself and go with it.
Thank you so much for that. That was absolutely priceless. And I was hoping, really was, and praying that I'll be able to get that question in at some point in this interview. So thank you for giving me the opportunity in your narrative. I want to take you back to your gift, and I want to call it a gift, if I may. Okay. I was reading up about you and doing the research for the interview, and I loved the story of when you got your first job in the bike shop, and you noticed, I think it was skateboards, you noticed that there was a craze to do with skateboards, and you started stocking accessories and that sort of stuff. So you were able to watch and see the signs of the times. You were able to see what's going on out there in society. You're like an observer and spot things. Prophets have the same gift, I would say. They're able to see the signs of the times, but then bring God's lens upon that and say, well, actually, things are like that, but God wants them to be like that. So it feels to me very similar. Maybe not exactly the same, but very, very similar. You're able to look for the signs of the times. And Jesus talks about that actually in Scripture. Would you say that's a gift?
Yes. Not everybody can do that. So there are pioneers and there are maintainers. And if we just take Restore Hope. Restore Hope was founded in 2002 on the back of what I felt God say to me at a concert at Wembley Stadium Noel Richards was holding, probably in the mid-90s. And it was all about, in a way, working with children that are in tough places.
Right.
And you could say, well, did you see you in all of that? Me in all of that? And the answer is probably. But my situation by the mid-90s was quite different to the situation in the mid-60s. And And I sort of worked out of that. And as I reflected back and I looked back, I could see that there were people who have been instrumental, been stepping stones in me getting from where I was to where I am. Mm. And in a way, you look back and think, so why did they do that? Mm. And therefore, today, I would say it's a bit like passing on the baton. You don't need to say to somebody every time you do an act of kindness. And generosity is an act of kindness, and generosity isn't all about money. Generosity could be an investment in time, passing on that baton, a stepping stone with the knowledge that I have for a child that's a Gary when he was 8 to a Gary then when he's 28, when he's 48, when he's 58. And thinking, why did he do that? And I'm thinking of a guy called Vic Butcher who had 5 toy shops in Hertfordshire. And I just started and I drove to see him to really get some advice. He just gave me a car full of toys. Oh. I said, well, how much do I use? He said, you can have those. Well, why? And I don't know why he did that. And I don't know what his motive was, because these days I often say to people, that was really kind, or somebody's pioneering trying to do something, and I'll often say to them, well what's your motive? What spurred you to do that? And where something engages with me and encourages me and sparks in me, and I feel aligned to it, and I say to somebody, what's your motive? Very often it is their Christian faith. That's why they're choosing to do that particular thing. Not always, because not every brilliant thing started and by a Christian. In fact, far from it, actually. So most things I do would be inspired by my Christian faith. That, that's what I think God's saying to me right now, so I need to get involved with that, or do that, or help with some funding of that. So I want to leave, I'm 60 odd now, I want to leave a legacy. I'm now thinking, what difference can I do? How can I make that Gary Grant of today, how can I make that life easier for him? So that's what I heard in amongst all that noise of that concert at Wembley Stadium. And it took about nearly 8 to 10 years for Restore Hope to come into being. In fact, God gave me the word restore hope. It's not a Gary word. So I had the word, the name of the charity, years before the charity started. And then what we found is that the number of people, today we must have over 200 volunteers.
So just give us the snapshot then.
So basically what happened...
What is Restored Hope?
Restored Hope is basically... It is a place, a safe place where mainly families and children can come and learn, coming out of a really tough place. Not exclusively, but predominantly a tough place. So we have a lot of single mums down here with children. We have a lot of families that are struggling down here. We run all sorts of different courses. And it is a place of like, in fact, we've often used the ladder down here. The ladder's not here today, but there's a ladder down here, and it's like and Graham, our director, calls it's the ladder of hope. You don't go from a position of hopelessness to hope in one step, because if you are in that dark place of hopelessness, which is the opposite to hope, it's going to take a lot of loving and care and nurturing to take you through, because it's not something you catch that you get over. It's a journey. And the journey of Restore Hope is the banner over the door is welcome. That's the first thing. It's not conditional welcome, it is welcome. So basically we bought this estate back in 2002. It's 365 acres. It's predominantly farmland. We've got woods, we've got a lake, 12-acre lake, fishing lake. We've got some barns that we've used for worship. We've got this dairy the old dairy that we're in today. And normally this will be filled up with mums and children. So we might run a cafe down here, just an introductory cafe. We run family, I forget the name of it now, I should get it, but I think it's Families for You, which is a course. We run all sorts of different things in the way of teaching for giving back people self-worth, value. We run a course down here called Circle of Security, which is a parenting course of sorts, where we look at ourselves as parents and realise that our own parenting is born out of the parenting that we received, and helps us with our relationship, with our attachment with our children. And even as grandparents, our attachment to our children is quite important. So we are just revealing things to people which helps their relationship with their children, relationships with their partners, just changing their outlook on life. And a couple of things, my wife would say, I'm not down here often, so I don't know all the names of the different, mainly mums that are down here during the week. But one mum said to my wife, when I come to Restore Hope, regardless of the pressures of life, I leave here feeling like Mary Poppins.
Really?
So it doesn't matter what that dark place is, what that pressure is. This is a place of welcome, it's a place of love, it's a place of encouragement. And I can't tell you how many families are going through different things at Restore Hope. We work really closely with the local school. The kids come down here, they enjoy the grounds, they do river dipping, they collect bugs, they do all sorts of things that are not normally their life's experience. And one of the things we used to do was something called memory days. Because if I look back on my childhood, there's certain things that I can remember. Some were good and some were not so good. And they are memories. And those memories build up a bit of who we are. And we had a day down here for looked after children. And one of the children who turned up with calipers on his legs, and we had a football match. Well, he was every single type of footballer on the pitch all at the same time. He was the goalie, he was the defence, he was the centre forward, he was everything. He was just all over it. And then we went into we took the children fishing with the nets into the river. And one of our volunteers, he took the calipers off and they carried him in and stood him there so he could just do what the other kids were doing. And the letter from the parents, the carers, the foster parents, came back he got so wet we had to give him some clothes changing too. So they sent those clothes back, and the letter said, "You made our little kid feel one of the gang that day." That is the essence of Restore Hope.
Therefore, in the remaining time that we got left, I want to take you back, if I may, to the time when God restored your hope.
Yeah.
To that men's breakfast,
Yeah.
which I know you've talked about before, but I want to really dig into it, if I may. The interviews that I've seen, you talk about how prior God was, as you say, sort of like remote. RE lessons had left you cold. The notion of intimate relationship with God probably wasn't like with me, that didn't even know it as a concept, didn't know God even wanted that or even possible. But something happened when you went to that men's breakfast and you heard a different style, type of Christianity. And bless your heart, you talked about how you sat at the back of that church and you were a blubbering wreck, basically, in the most beautiful fashion.
Day after. Yep.
Please, please, please describe what was going on in your heart when this wave of emotion started to come across you.
So that was over 2 days.
Okay.
So the men's breakfast and then in church the next day. So the men's breakfast, I largely went because my wife bought me the ticket. Okay, I wasn't queuing up.
Oh, you dropped your mic. Oh, pause, everyone.
I can sort that out.
Right at the crucial moment.
I am capable.
We're live.
I wasn't queuing up to be in that men's breakfast because I didn't need this faith thing. And as I reflect back, it wasn't my childhood experience of church. The education around faith was flawed because nobody explained relationship. It was a history lesson rather than a living thing today. So we learned about the Second World War and the First World War, and we learned about Jesus turning water into wine. So I just put them all in the same history lesson category. And now I'm sitting in a church hall on a Saturday morning when I should be at work earning more money, because that was my primary objective in life, hearing Barry Kissel standing up telling his story about a relationship with Jesus.
So it was a story.
He just told stories.
The power of story.
Told stories.
Wow.
And the one that sticks to mind was that he was on the staff team at St Andrew's Chorleywood. I didn't even know where St Andrew's Chorleywood was. And God said to him one evening, go to London and pray for the homeless. So he said, I gathered 2 guys up and we drove up to London and we walked around and prayed for the homeless. And one of the girls in one of the doorways had run away from home. And he prayed with her and said, but do your parents know where you are? And she said, no. He said, well, would you like me to contact your parents and tell them that you're safe but living on the streets? Yes. So she gave him her parents' phone number. So he contacted her parents and said, I've met your daughter this evening. I just want to tell you she's safe, but she's living on the streets. That week, God told him to go back to London and see if she'd be happy for him to take her back to her parents, take her home. But, well, obviously, he couldn't contact her. He didn't know who she was. So with somebody else from church, he drove back to London. There she was again. And he said to her, I think God's saying, I need to take you home. And he drove her home, wherever it was. And he told that story. I'm thinking, wow, that's. I didn't actually think at that time that was an act of kindness. I just thought, what do you mean God keeps telling you to do these things? Yeah. You're listening to, who is this person that keeps talking to you? But he told other stories, and I'm thinking, this doesn't sound like a remote God in heaven somewhere. This sounds much more close and involved. And the other thing that I've often said about that first encounter with Barry, who's I still see reasonably regularly today, who's much more elderly and less able today, but still a man carrying the Spirit of God. There's something about him. He is completely immersed in the Bible, completely immersed in God, and I just saw a man with carrying utter peace, and he stood there humbly, just telling stories about a relationship that he had with Jesus. And as I say, it was alien to anything I'd ever heard. And I'm sitting there at 33 thinking, but why didn't anybody tell me? If faith is like this, why did I think it's like that? And then, as I say, the next day I decided I'd go and find Barry Kissel. I knew he'd come from Chorleywood. I went to the church where I thought he was in Chorleywood. Well, I only knew there was one church in Chorleywood. So I drove myself to Chorleywood by myself. I sat at the back. And all those images of church that people might have, as I had, they could largely be wrong. Because I think in 30 years of being a Christian, I think I realised actually I hadn't rejected Jesus. Nobody told me about this person of Jesus. I'd largely rejected church. I wasn't interested in church. Church was old, church was boring, church, why would you do that church thing? And actually, I'm not telling people to be a church member. I'm telling Jesus. I'm suggesting people might want to follow this guy called Jesus. So I turned up at church and I stood at the back and I started observing. First thing I noticed was that most of the people there were a good proportion of people there were young people. Young people in church, not old people, not good people, because I thought people were either good, old, and there was another type of good, old, or weak. I thought those were the classifications. That's how I think I would have, if you said to me, describe a Christian, they're old, they're good, or they're weak. I would have put them in that. And do you know what? I'm old, I'm probably not so good, and I'm weak. That's who I am. We're all weak people. Well, I looked around and thought, youngsters in church, what are they doing here? Then I thought, the place actually is quite friendly. I don't know why I thought maybe churches weren't friendly. I thought churches were rigid. And the way that I described that is, it was formal is a better word. I thought churches would just be formal. Now, some churches are, and that's not wrong. Other churches are, they're much more relaxed. And I would say this was an old-fashioned church, but very relaxed. So their method of worship, and I can now say the word worship compared with singing hymns, because I understand the difference now. You can sing hymns out of a hymn book, and that's just a song, or you can understand that this person of Jesus is worthy to be worshipped. There's a difference. And this particular old-fashioned church had a screen up and a band, as opposed to a hymn book and an organ. Both have their place, but the hymn book and organ didn't tick my box, or hadn't on the few occasions I've gone to church when the children were christened and Christmas and things. But worship and a band and the richness of that, which we sometimes have on the Sunday morning programme or on Songs of Praise, when you're getting a mixture of presentations of church and worship, I just thought, wow, this is rich, this is alive. Because I think that our faith has to be relevant. It's not an obligation to go to church. It is a choice to choose to do that. And the impact of Sundays has to have a relevance to our daily lives. So I'm not living a rope faith, do this, do this. I'm hopefully living an active faith as God leads me on this journey. And then, to my utter surprise, and then my reaction, a lady stood up just as the service was about to start. So the band were playing, and the service was about to start. And she said, "We've been praying about the service, and we've got 3 pictures." Now, this was a bit bonkers, really. Going to church and this lady talking about pictures at prayer, which, if you read the Bible now, it's clear God said he will talk to us through dreams and visions and pictures and words of knowledge. That's his way of communicating with us. Well, that made no sense to me then. That, again, wasn't taught at school, or if it was, I wasn't listening. And the 3 pictures was a small sailing boat on the high seas, can only go in the direction that the wind and the tide will take it, no motor. And the second picture was a monkey wrench, big adjustable spanner, nuts and bolts and springs, and something wanted to be released. And the third picture was a whole row of railway arches completely blacked out and somebody inside too frightened to come out. I just burst out crying. Now, the pictures didn't mean anything to me then, and they don't mean anything to me now. But that was my reaction to the pictures. So that was my reaction to what God was saying through this lady to me, albeit it made no sense. There was no, I can relate to that. It wasn't like that. So now I'm in church crying and going through the most amazing, peaceful experience that I've ever experienced. And then to finish that very quickly, because it's a long story, but the reality was, I went to the wrong church that night, because Barry Kissel was at St Andrew's, Chorleywood, and I'd actually gone to Christchurch, Chorleywood, not realising that there were two churches, in fact more than that, in this small village of Chorleywood. But the thing is, God knows us individually by name. He knows who we are, He knows how we operate, how we think, which is why there's no such thing as a stereotyped faith, because we're all different, and our response to God will be different, and that's absolutely fine. God's just asking for our faithfulness to go on a journey with him. So I went to the wrong church, found God, came back, and that's had an impact on my family, on my children, on my business, and on many people around. So to finish, because I know this interview's gone on long, I was asked to speak to the ministers of the Parliament of Jersey and at their prayer breakfast. So I said yes, and then thought, crikey, what on earth are you going to say to me? You know, I don't preach, it's not what I do. And for me, my faith is about a story. So I thought, okay, God, what do you want me to say? And he really quickly said to me, rig.
Say that again, sorry?
Rig.
Rig.
R-I-G.
Oh, okay.
And I thought, rig? What's all the rig about, Lord? And the rest of the story, please? You want me to say something? And I thought, okay, there's boats in the harbour. Rig, it's all about the sails and things. I still don't get it. He said, no, Gary, it's not about that at all. Rig, R-I-G, it's about reputation, it's about integrity, and it's about generosity. And as a Christian, all of those three things are important. We fail daily, but we pick ourselves up, we dust ourselves down, and we do the best we can to have the best reputation we can. It's years to achieve and minutes to lose. We try and do what we do with integrity. So we do what we do both in public and behind the scenes. Both, one's visible, one's not visible, integrity. And wherever we can, without question, we are generous. And I said to a guy at the toy fair last week, who I don't know whether he's got faith or not, but it's just the walk of doing the daily stuff. I told him about rig. He said, Gary, oh, that's right, he's just started his business. I said, it's really important that when you start your business and work through this, these are the letters that I'd say to you, rig. And he said to me, what's rig? I told him, R-I-G, reputation, integrity, and generosity. I bumped into him the next day. He said to me, what does F stand for? I said, what do you mean? He said, I got the I and the G bit. What's the, I said, I didn't say fig. I said rig. What's that then? Reputation. That's it. He said, it's reputation, isn't it? And then I saw him a week later in Germany at Toy Fair. He said, I've got it, R-I-G, reputation, integrity, and generosity. So this isn't a thing for Christians. This is a thing for us to live life. Because if we could trust everybody, whether it be our politicians, whether it be people we're doing business with, whether it's people we bump into in the street, our next door neighbour, if those were three things that we were focusing on, wouldn't we change our society?
Can I just therefore try to summarise, if I may, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've got a second to last question after this. When you were in that church over the 2-day period for the men's breakfast, you met the living God, and that was the difference. Mm-hmm. You met the living God, and that was the difference, and restored your hope and changed your life, and that's why you had the emotional response.
Yep.
Awesome. Brilliant. Wow. I asked this question a lot of, and this is second to last question if I may, but with you though, it's particularly, for me anyway, powerful, because I've heard some stories from other people, thus in a secondary sort of way, about how you have been involved in God moments for them. So I've heard stories, I think, and I might have this wrong, but I've heard stories from Mike Pilavachi talking about how there were moments when some sort of crisis was befalling them in their church in Watford, and it was generally a financial something, and then I think it was you, and it's, you got a word from God sort of saying, oh, I need to go and give them X amount of money. I don't know why, but I've got to do. And I think I'm saying, firstly, if I'm allowed to ask that, what is that you? Has that happened to you? I'm pretty sure it has. And what's been the most profound moment of that, when God has said to you, boom, out of the blue, go and give those people? Because I know your calling, as you called it, is generosity and tithing. You said you can't outgive God. I've heard you in other interviews say that. So what has been, if you like, that comes to mind now, and a snapshot of it, the most profound moment of that?
So I have kicked Mike on a number of occasions for going public with that, because it was, yes, exactly. And now we're just publicising it again. Can I interview you,
Mike, please? I want to interview you.
So what happened in the early days of Soul Survivor, they did one of their gigs.
Right.
And they hired all this equipment, and they put it in the van overnight, and the van got stolen.
So I heard.
And Mike woke up in the morning and realised when the van had gone, in his own words, I thought Soul Survivor was over.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, I woke up that morning and I absolutely felt I should support Soul Survivor. Mike at the time was working out of St Andrew's Chorley Wood, so I knew Mike. In fact, I think Mike might have been our oldest son's youth leader for a while.
Okay.
And what I loved about Mike was he's an outrageously, almost stupid risk taker. But he's an outrageously stupid risk taker for God.
I love that.
Okay. Mike used to be an accountant, but Mike still makes 2 and 2 7 because he has no ability to work out whether what he's doing makes any economic sense at all, because he couldn't care less.
I can tell you two are friends.
We are absolute friends, but the point is, I can't do what Mike does, and Mike cannot do what I'm doing. And if it wasn't for the wealth creators, the Christian wealth creators, to pile in behind the outrageously extravagant, risk-taking, faith-believing Mike Pilavaches, and there's many others, they can't take the risks that God's asking them to take.
So what happened that morning then when you got up?
I just gave him a check.
No, but brilliant. But you got up. Was it just like a strange feeling that came over you?
So the way in which it's really difficult to know when exactly when God's prompting you, but all I can say is when you know, you know.
Right.
You know, there's something in, I can't remember who said it. So there's something in you know that you know. Okay, and again, God might. So you might be sitting somewhere, and God might put in your mind, or even if He doesn't, somebody will come to mind.
Okay.
Out of the blue, and that is a prompt to give them a ring.
But I found it incredible though that the amount of money you gave him was seemingly, from the story I've heard, the exact money that they needed.
But God knows that.
I know, but
God's economy balances. It's not for us to question why or how.
No.
You know, if God gives you a number, that's a number. And if you're capable of doing the number, you just do the number. If God puts somebody in your mind, you don't think, I'll ring somebody different. You do that. And when you're not trying to double guess God, just believe that God's God and He knows best, and do that thing. So there have been other situations, but that's the most encouraging one, because you know, it was Mike Pilavaches, 1 Samuel 20 or 30, whichever one it is. Those that honour me, I will honour. Mike was honouring the Lord. Somebody had other ideas about Mike's success and Soul Survivor's birthing, but God didn't. Okay, and God got stuck in through me, and it, you know, in the overall scheme of things, I don't know. I can't remember how much, and hopefully Mike hasn't told you, but I don't know how much it was.
That much?
But, well, it might have been that much, but that much was the right amount of money. Not too little, not too much, but God knew the number, and that's why that is the walk of faith.
So what is God telling you now then, just to cut to the chase? If you
just be faithful.
Just be faithful.
Just respond to the challenges and to the respond to the challenges and calling that God gets you to do. So I'm not a really good reader. So if I'm challenged over the amount of the Bible I read every week or month, I would be flawed. It would be poor. Okay. I choose to go to church every week as best I possibly can whenever I'm around, and God is amazing in the way that He will highlight for me something that He won't highlight for you, because He'll be saying something different to you. And that is the amazing thing about the body of Christ. We're all different. We all feel differently. We see differently. We react differently. Our circumstances are different, but we each have a part to play. It's not for... When you were talking earlier, you were talking about the thin, the fat, the wide, the narrow. I can't remember quite what you said. And that is the body of Christ. Every single person has a part to play. Amen. You're not excluded because of past failure, because there is this wonderful thing called forgiveness. And when you get the forgiveness from God, you've actually got to learn to forgive yourself. You can keep bringing it back up. And I love when John says, God rubs things out, He doesn't rub things in.
Oh, wow.
So when you pray and say, Lord, I am not your perfect Christian. I fail daily. And really, people need to hear this. You don't have to be the very best person to be a Christian. You know, even gun runners and drug traffickers, they become Christians. God welcomes us all, regardless of our circumstances and our background. But when you say sorry, God with the right heart, God hears that and it is rubbed out. Only people keep reminding you of your past failings and rub things in.
With that in mind then, last question if I may, because what you just said then prompted this, so it's really apt. I asked this question of all my interviewees, and you don't have to be a theologian, it's what you think that I want to hear. Imagine you are present at the resurrection. You're in the garden, in the Middle East, and you witness that encounter with Jesus and Mary. You know the encounter where Mary goes to hug him, and Jesus says, "Don't hold on to me, so I have not yet ascended to my Father." Now you could imagine you're a gardener, and you're tilling the land, as it were, and it's, I don't know, 20 feet away from you. They can't quite see you because they're engrossed, but you can see all of it. What happened to humanity on that first Easter day?
You have to have been transformed. You cannot have observed that and dismissed that. You would have had to have been transformed. And I guess doubting Thomas comes to mind. And that's why I think stories are so important.
Yeah.
Because there are days when I can doubt that what I've found is true. And I have to go back to the weekend that God broke in and say, that actually happened. Even on a bad day, that still actually happened. And for people that lose their faith, people that were even fired up about Jesus and lose their faith, I don't think they've gone right back to that day. Right. The day that the presence of God fell on them, that they believed that Jesus was true. It was a reality. So for that gardener peering through the weeds, seeing it all happening, that must have been that would have been a life-changing observation. And as that gardener started on that journey, as that Gary started on that journey, and got all the knocks of life, and people saying, "You're mistaken, it's just a joke, this whole Christian thing. I don't know why you believe all that. God doesn't really exist." You can have that stuffing knocked out of you. You can be brought back down to earth. But you need to carry on peering through those reeds, through those bushes, and the reality of the first day in which you encountered Jesus.
Amen to that. And in some sense, this is what this channel is all about. So as I mentioned before we started the interview, this channel is about what can happen in the lives of ordinary people when they say yes to God. But it's also when I felt like God was calling me to do this. And as I said to you, I really don't know what I'm doing here. I just know I'm called to do it. So I'm stumbling through and giving it a go with great excitement, but also like, wow, what am I doing? Into the mix of all that, it is that command that God gave to the Hebrew people and thus to us to recount the things he has done in life, to tell those stories, because there is such power and evangelistic power in telling those stories. It restores lives, it restores hope, it's amazing. Gary, thank you so much. I just want to finish with my spotlight questions, if I may. Bit of fun, and then we'll pray us. You can pray us out, if that's all right. Yeah, you ready? Here we go. The thing you can't live without.
My mobile phone.
Oh, I like that. No one said that. Normally people get past that. Oh, it's my wife or my husband, but I like that. It's brilliant.
Kath would say, if I was gone for a week, you wouldn't miss me. If you lost your phone for 5 minutes, you'd be hunting around the house.
If you weren't doing what you're doing now, this is a big question for you. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what job would you most like to have?
A job? That's a really good question. You should have prompted me with these questions beforehand. Right.
But that's the fun of it.
The thing that comes to mind, if I was in my position today, and if there was no limit on money, one of the things that I'd love to do, in fact, I am going to do it.
Wow. Watch this space, everyone.
I'm going to do this, but I won't be able to do it all the time because I'm
Okay.
still working, but I am going to do it anyway. I am going to go to London because I am ashamed with the number of people who are living on the streets in 2020. As a nation, we should be ashamed. Some people choose to, but there's a lot who aren't choosing to be. That is unfortunately, that's just the issues that they're going through, which is why I'm delighted to be involved with New Hope, Watford, working with the people that are living on the streets, those that are currently homeless, making a big difference to their lives, and their stories are unbelievable. In fact,
Love to hook me up.
You need a story from somebody who's been there, who's now had their life transformed by New Hope Watford. I'm giving you another, right, a quick answer. Right, I'm going to go to London, and I'm going to go and speak to everybody that God highlights to me who's sitting on the streets, and I'm going to give them £10.
Awesome!
And can I tell you, I was speaking at the International Christian Chamber of Commerce.
As you do.
About a month ago. And my PA had given me all the instructions. You're to go on this, get off at Chancery Lane, and the church is just there.
Mm-hmm.
I got on the wrong train. I couldn't see Chancery Lane on the thing, and I saw Holborn on. And I looked at the address, and I was going to Holborn. So I thought, wrong address, go to Holborn. Go off at Holborn, and 15 minutes later walk past Chancery Lane to go to where I'm going, which is why obviously I should have got off at Chancery Lane. But that's not the story. The story was I walked out of Holborn Station and I saw a guy sitting there. And I don't give money to everybody, but in fact I walked past it and then went back and I gave him £5. But I always say to them, what's your story? I always say to them, what's your story? Because when you hear the stories, it's not what you think. And I do think we've got a wrong attitude and we are judgmental for those living on the streets. And I bet you for most people, it is poor life choices. That's what you will hear in your head. And this guy started telling me his story. And part of that story was, and I used to sleep over there under the scaffolding, and in June, this is January, in June, I had my bag stolen and it had my driving license and passport in it. I'm going to get a job. I'm going for a job interview with one of the parcel carriers on Thursday. And I said, but that's a really important thing for you, isn't it? Yeah. So how are you going to look? You've got one opportunity of presenting yourself in a presentable way. He says, I don't know. So I said, so when you're not staying on the streets, where do you stay? He said, well, sometimes I stay in the backpackers hostel down the road. How much is it? £16 a night. So I felt God said, just give him 20 quid. So I said, look, I've given you some money for a hot drink now because it was freezing cold that morning. I said, this £20 is for your night stay on Wednesday, so you can shower, eat, clean yourself up. So on Thursday, you are presenting yourself in your very best possible way to achieve that job, because that's the journey out of where you are. I said, this is not a hand up. I said, this is not a handout, it's a hand up. Okay? So then I get off walking to go and speak where I'm speaking. And that's when I went past the wrong. Now, so I'm standing in front of these guys, talking to them, guys, ladies, the audience, guys and girls. And I felt God say to me, should you be led by your head or your heart? Because your head would say, that was the most stupid thing you ever did. You basically just gave him 1.5 litres of scotch. That's why I don't give people's reasons. I don't give to people on the streets because they make bad life choices. My head also says, if I'd been on the streets all night in that weather, I think I would have bought a bottle of scotch too. Okay? Because that's my circumstances. I don't want to remember the freezing cold night. So I was led by my heart, which may have been a mistake. But I think, so I'm saying, should you be led by your head or your heart? And this wasn't part of what I was due to say to them, but it's just, that was the experience of then and there. That's what I felt God was saying to me en route to where I was going. And we concluded it's both. So generosity should be both our head, thinking it through, and our compassion through our heart. What was your question? That wasn't the answer.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. I'm going to pray for you big time. And when you do it,
yes.
let us know about it and tell us the stories.
Yep.
And we'll hook up again and we'll capture those stories, okay? Because obviously we've both got a calling, it was seen, really the power of storytelling stories. Almost feels incongruous now to go back to these questions, but that was just so powerful. But let's just do it anyway for a bit of fun. You're in heaven for the first time. And you meet Jesus for the first time, face to face. What's the first thing that you'd like to ask him?
Right, first thing that comes to mind. Thank you for not judging me.
You're in heaven for the first time, you meet Jesus for the first time. What's the first thing that you'd like him to say to you?
Well done.
You're in heaven for the first time. Who's the first family member you'd like to meet?
I haven't. Right, there's the one that's in my heart, which I can't tell you about.
Fair enough.
Because it's too close to the family, and I haven't lost that many family members. And the trouble is, by doing that, you've got to sort of hierarchy them. So without wanting to do that, it would be my father.
Wonderful. Gary, you have been the most incredible interviewee. This has just been superb. I can't wait for this to come out. I hope it blesses countless people across the world. Not only, as I said, when it first comes out, but as the channel is developed, it really is. And I think you've got a call in these stories, not just generosity, and not just children, and clearly restoring hope, but there's something about story in that. And I'd love to have a chat with you subsequently.
Thank you.
Would you mind praying this out?
But I'd be delighted to. Lord, for so many of us, we had rejected church. And in doing so, we had rejected Jesus. And I thank you that I had the opportunity of hearing through a story that Jesus was alive and well and intimately concerned about me and my everyday situations. And that somebody who was there who unconditionally loved me. Not because I did good, not because I deliberately wasn't so good, but he just loved me because I was a person called Gary. So maybe there are people who've just watched this video who've never experienced this person called Jesus. And I just pray now that, Heavenly Father, you would break into their lives, that you would show them in some way that you are real, that you would reveal themselves in a significant but personal way that cannot be dismissed as a coincidence. And that for each one of us, we would start a journey, yes, with lots of questions, but not be so closed mind that we can't start the journey until all the questions are answered. And that as that journey starts, that you will encourage each one of us, and each one of us that are actually already on that journey, we need to be encouraged daily. But for those that are still learning, no, we're all still learning. I thank you for a course called Alpha, a really safe environment in which those of us that are just starting out on the journey of following Jesus, or even considering the journey of following Jesus, or even don't even know who this person is, but you've heard good stories about this person called Jesus, that would enroll on an Alpha course wherever you are, they're all over the country, and just devote 8 to 10 nights of your life and exploring whether Jesus could be real and living for you. So I thank you for what you've done in my life, in my family's life. Thank you for the impact that you've had through me on my business. And I ask, Lord, that for many other people that are currently living in a hopeless situation, that they through you can find hope and can celebrate and dance and be released. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.